There we go. We're back.
Chris, we are back. Oh my goodness, I need to get up our welcome banner. My goodness, we're ready.
Welcome.
We're ready and we're not ready at the same time. Welcome back from our vacation.
Wow. What a couple of weeks it's been.
What a couple of weeks it's been. Indeed. It felt like a very long time, Chris, didn't it?
It did. I can't even. I'm trying to remember.
I
the
know.
last time we sat here.
Right?
This was sometime in, I don't know, 1907.
1907.
Feels like it.
Well, it's certainly been a long time. It's been a few weeks, but nothing feels normal, and things are getting so much better, but so many things are still wrong, as you so cleverly observed last year.
so eloquently.
So eloquently stated, everything is wrong.
Everything's wrong.
Indeed, Chris, indeed. And we had our finalist night, part 1, last time, and it was a fabulous night, Michael Belanger, and we had the prize winner,
Patron, and Rebecca Dimian.
And Rebecca Dimian. Oh, what a night of incredible readings. And we're so excited for tonight, too, where we'll get to hear from Sam Keller and from Christopher Madden himself from Woodhull Press. And he'll also be sharing a bit of the other finalists.
Ryan Stovall.
Poetry.
Ryan unable to be here personally, but Chris is going to read.
Yes.
The other Chris is going to read some of his poems from his collection, which was a finalist. So, yeah. And that's great. So that way we get all 5 finalists.
And I think this is a great way to get reoriented after our vacation, to have our finalist night, part 2, a little just bookends there.
Absolutely.
It's just perfect. Well, Chris, I wanted to tell everyone about my earrings.
Yes. Tell us about those earrings.
These are my brand new little cactus earrings. And because
Don't they hurt?
I know. I shouldn't have touched it. But, since I'm still spending at least part of my time losing my mind in my apartment, I thought I'd do the cactus earrings with the matching eyeshadow, and then sort of matching nails and a little bit of a ring going on. So, I like to wear something interesting on FUMFA night, Chris?
So do I. It's my earrings are very small, hard to tell.
They are diamonds. Nobody can see it.
Diamonds. I wear them. I do a strange thing. I wear them in my ear, like they're inside my ear.
Oh, those kinds. Yeah.
Yes, because they're so valuable.
Well, Mom and Dad have just arrived, and Mom noticed maybe the most important thing, which is your microphone, Chris.
That's right. I've had this mic a long time, but I just didn't really have the proper gear to get hooked up. And now here I am. So I feel very professional, like I'm a big shot radio guy or something.
Yeah. Oh my God. Michael White is in the house.
Miguel Blanco is out there.
Hey, Lefe.
That's right. And by the way, Mom, I hope you're feeling better. Sorry to hear about your woes. And
yes.
You take care of yourself. And we'll see you soon.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so hopefully we will get to actually see each other in person for the first time, Chris. For the first time in a long time at this lovely Make Music Day that's coming up. And we're going to be taking pictures. It's going to be amazing. And you have several gigs coming up as well. People, we're going to start getting out in the world. We're going to start seeing each other in the real world too.
That's right. Make Music Day. It's all over the world, in like more than 1,000 cities across the world. People are making music live, outdoors, including here in beautiful Ridgefield. And I'll be performing as part of that. And then Barb Jennis, who was
Yes.
poet on our show here. Not too long ago, she's doing an open mic in front of the Ridgefield Library, and they're going to have cans there, and people, I guess this is how they qualify as making music, but when people read their poems, then it's going to be lots of percussion.
It's going to be awesome. I'm very excited about
That's right, and you're going to read a poem.
Yes, I am. I'm gonna choose which ones could be maybe the most performative, and narrow it down. I think it's gonna be fabulous. Really, really great. Yeah. So it is 8 o'clock. It's time for our official welcome to FUMFA number 54. Fairfield Book Prize Finalist Night Part 2. And we are so excited to hear from finalist Sam Keller and a FUMFA alum and Woodhall Press co-founder, Christopher Madden. It'll be so great to have him back. And then, of course, we're going to hear a bit from him, from the finalist who can't be here tonight, Ryan Stovall. And then we'll have a just wonderful Q&A at the end. So thank you so much for being back with us on Facebook, on YouTube. And it's going to be a fabulous night, a really fabulous night. Chris, can you tell us about a few other things that are coming up soon?
Coming up next week, which happens to be National Children's Day. Now, I think we're all children, so I'm not quite sure who doesn't count on that day. But anyway, we have Julie Sarkisian, who's a fabulous fiction and nonfiction writer, but she'll probably be reading some fiction, and poet Philip Ginsberg.
Oh, so excited to introduce him to you.
Who's amazing.
Yes.
And then the following week, we have a dear old friend of mine, Stephanie Dickinson, who has 2 recent books out, one collection of poetry and one amazing nonfiction book.
Awesome.
And she also writes fiction. She really does everything. She's also a publisher, Rain Mountain Press. And she will be reading with our friend Sonia Huber. So it's gonna be a big night. And then coming up after that, we're going to have a whole series of open mics with different flavors and different, including FUMFA. We're going to have a FUMFA open mic. If anybody from FUMFA out there wants to participate in that, please let us know.
Get in touch.
We're also doing kind of a hybrid open mic night with Put It Into Chat.
Woo!
Our good friend Midnight will be co-hosting.
Curtis.
The one and only will be hosting with us. That's going to be an amazing night. And
it really is.
And there'll be some special nights as the summer progresses.
Yes, we want to keep you entertained and full of fabulous literary entertainment. And we are just really excited about everything that's coming up, and so excited to share it all with you. And so glad to see you here tonight. I see Anne in the chat. I see Sarah Sleeper. Hey, Sarah.
Yeah.
Oh, fabulous.
California is in the house.
California. Perfect. All right. Well, Chris, I think, and it's hi from Rose and Mike Banfield. Sam's parents. Oh, Sam.
Sam's parents are watching. Sam, be careful.
That's so great.
You're going to read that sexy chapter, weren't you?
Uh-oh. All right. Chris, should I go ahead and read Sam's bio for us? All right. Let me just pull it on up here. Okay. And Chris, why don't we bring her on up?
Oh, yeah. That's a good idea.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I'm just scrolling a little bit. Perfect. All right. I've got it. I've got the bio.
Scrolling. Okay. I'm going to add her.
All right. Yes. No dueling.
There we go. There she is.
Perfect. Welcome.
And your nephew's here too.
Hi.
All right, Sam, we're going to introduce you with your bio. Sam Keller is a first-time novelist who grew up in South Africa and arrived in Connecticut in 2013 via 12 years, 2 children, and a career in advertising and marketing in London. She completed her MFA at Fairfield University in 2016. Her short fiction has been published in Narrative, Permafrost, and Kajabi, I think is how, and has been selected as a finalist in the Crazy Horse Fiction Prize and made the honorable mention list in the Glimmer Train Fiction Open 2019. Sam is working on her second novel, and congratulations to you on being a finalist.
Thank you very much. Thank you
For the
very
Brava, brava.
And we're so excited to hear from your manuscript.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. We'll leave you to it.
Great. All right. I'm reading a chapter from my novel, which is called Light Remains. The chapter that I'm reading picks up on about chapter 4 or 5. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. It's important to know that the novel is set in South Africa and in 1960. The lead character, Eve Hunter, lives on a dairy farm about 35 miles out of Johannesburg. But in this scene, she's at boarding school in Johannesburg. And her father has given her the nickname Johnny. The chapter is called Weaver Bird, and it's set, as I say, in March 1960. Through the window of the dorm room I shared with my best friend, Libby Peel, I watched a group of boys play a pickup game of touch rugby. One side was shirts and the other skins. The negative space in their T-shirts was still present in their tan lines, their pale backs and shoulders contrasting with darker arms and necks. They tumbled over one another like lion cubs with oversized paws, and I rubbed my feet together under the desk, imagining the itch and scratch of the close-cropped grass on the player's skin. If I was an animal, I'd be an antelope, I said, quick and light and as pale as the felt. You'd be a what? Libby did not look up from her book. Our dormitory was on the second floor of a Victorian mansion that had originally been built as the home of a wealthy mine magnate, but had lost some of its ambitious elegance in its conversion to a boarding school for young women. Painted an institutional beige, the room's best feature was a large picture window which occupied almost the entire top half of the end wall. It looked out on an oak tree and across the playing field of the all-boys high school over the road to the concrete skyline that marked the southern edge of Johannesburg. Libby and I shared the desk that stood beneath the fixed center pane, which was flanked by narrower windows that opened outwards with a hard twist and push on the iron handles. The morning light angled through to cast a yellow rectangle that flowed across the desk and pooled on the floor between our beds. I returned my attention to the glossary in the biology textbook that I was reviewing for a test later that week. Absorption zone, adventitious root, anatomy. The textbook was full of dried felt grass, flattened leaves, and a selection of wild flowers that my father had collected on the farm. He mailed them to me once a month between the pages of his letters, and I pressed them in the heavy textbook. The dried plants smelled of sunshine and soil, and even in this one-dimensional, desiccated state, still resembled their living selves. I could picture exactly where each had been picked or plucked, at the river, behind the barn, beside the track that ran past the dairy. I reached over to grip the handle of the window and jiggled until it turned the required 45 degrees to release it from its frame. Shouts for the ball and a thud of contact carried in on the warm breath of the November morning. A church bell tolled in the distance. I breathed in and was transported by a note of damp earthiness within the metallic smell of the city to early mornings on the farm. We really should be outside, I said. Libby lay on her stomach on her bed with a book propped up on the pillow. This time she stopped reading when I spoke and followed my gaze out the window. We should be at church, she said, and returned to her book. My sister Lily had come by earlier this morning on her way to church to ask if I wanted to walk with her. I told her I had studying to do, but now I wondered if sitting for an hour on a hard pew would have been the better choice. Come on, Libs, please. I need some fresh air. I have to finish this book. It's my mom's only copy, and she wants it back before her book club. Marking her place with a finger, Libby folded back the brown paper cover to reveal the title, A World of Strangers by Nadine Gordimer. The banned novel was like contraband, a single copy passed from one reader to another. Is it terribly racy? I asked. My mother kept a similarly wrapped volume of Lady Chatterley's Love in the back of her drawer in the sunroom. It's not that it's sexy, it's subversive. Libby rolled her eyes to dismiss this claim. My mother is making me read it. I knew the real reason Libby didn't want to go outdoors was because she didn't want to miss a call from Jonty inviting her to the freshers' ball at Wits University, where he was a first year. The buzz throughout the boarding house was all about the dance. Who was lucky enough to be invited? Who was going with whom? Who was wearing what? Hairstyles, makeup, handbags. I sagged back into my chair, swiveled around, and put my bare feet up on Libby's bed. The eiderdown was more expensive than anything I owned. A richly woven cotton, embroidered with white roses that stood proud of the fabric and rubbed with a pleasing pressure against my soles. Libby's toenails were painted with pink pearl, while mine were bare and uninteresting. She was only 6 months older than me, yet seemed so much more grown up. Born in Johannesburg, Libby had lived in the city all her life. She had been to the theatre more than once, had travelled overseas, knew how to ski, and was going steady with Jonty. I had been thrilled when we were paired up on our first day at boarding school. The idea that this sophisticated girl, who styled herself on Jackie Kennedy, wanted to be my friend was still hard for me to get used to. We frequently spent weekends together at Libby's home in Houghton, where I was given my own bedroom, just one of the many unoccupied guest bedrooms Mrs. Peel had available for visitors. Unlike the farmhouse, where Lily and I had shared a room all our lives, and where, on the few occasions we did have overnight guests, the two of us had slept top to tail on the sofa in the lounge, Libby's mom was liberal in her politics and had a whispered association with the Black Sash. She had once told us off for being dismissive about voting when we turned 18. There are people in South Africa who have lived and died for the right to vote, girls. Mr. Peel, on the other hand, was an intimidating and distracted businessman who only half listened to the conversation between his wife, his daughter, and her little friend, and seemed to tolerate his wife's politics as if they were a feminine hobby she had taken up, like book club or sewing, and that could just as easily be set down if it became inconvenient or interfered with their social or travel plans. The first time I'd sat down to dinner with the family, served by a houseboy and a maid, Mr. Peel had responded to my explanation of where our farm was by observing with a smile the other side of the tracks. Mrs. Peel had leaned over and aimed an ineffectual slap at her husband's shoulder. "Shush, George." I knew that we literally lived across the main railway track that ran through Johannesburg and probably a few other railway lines too, but I saw my friend's gracious embarrassment and understood the true meaning of the phrase, and it stung. The Peels were rich in a way I could not really comprehend. Mr. Peel's family owned copper mines in northern Rhodesia. They had a holiday home on the south coast and a farm near the Bechuana land border. Although I'd never thought of my family as poor, there were things we simply did not have. Things I'd accepted we'd never have. Things I'd never realized I wanted. I'd reacted defensively, exaggerating my family's role as milk producers. The size of the herd and the acreage they managed were given dimensions that I had to then maintain. And after that dinner, whenever I met Libby's friends and was asked about my family and where I came from, to my shame, I referred to our home as the farm. My parents are on the farm this weekend, as if it were a second home we used for leisure, visiting only on the weekends or during holidays. I tugged at the hem of my cotton blouse. It hung almost straight over the very slight rise of my chest. As a late bloomer, my mother's words, I knew that with my sandy blonde bobbed hair, pale eyelashes, and boyish hips, I was in no danger of being asked to this or any other dance anytime soon. "Why don't we just walk down to the church and see if Jonty is there?" I suggested, knowingly trying to manipulate my friend. I wanted to feel the lawn beneath my feet, the pebbled path, the cool water in the fountain at the center of the quad. "He's not. He's camping in the Magaliesberg with his family this weekend." Libby rolled onto her back and carried on with her book. Bracing my legs against her bed, I rocked back on my chair and closed my eyes. The sun dissolved into molten light behind my eyelids as I relaxed my muscles, lengthened my legs, softened my shoulders, and focused on balancing on the chair's back legs. A movement like a shadow passing quickly across a lit doorway, followed by a flapping and a short scream from Libby, knocked me out of my reverie. All 4 chair legs and my own 2 feet dropped to the floor. A flash of bright yellow in the corner of the room revealed a male weaver bird flapping hard in the gap between the ceiling and the top of the regulation wardrobe. "It came through the window," Libby said from behind her book. The bird landed briefly on the slight curve of wood that passed for decoration on the top of the wardrobe, then flew up again, working its small wings against the ceiling in quick, surprisingly loud taps like a flag in a strong wind. "Keep still. I'll try to herd it out," I said. But before I could get to it, the bird, drawn by the illusion of freedom beyond the unseen barrier, launched itself from the top of the wardrobe and flew directly at the center pane. It struck the glass hard and dropped onto the open biology textbook I had been revising moments before. The small feathered body curled into itself with its black and golden wings folded behind, and the pale orange legs and feet tucked into its belly. The weaver's eye was open, as round and as red as a lucky bean. Its black center was dull and unfocused. Libby's brown eyes peered over the top of her book. Is it all right? Just stunned, I hope. There was a knock on the door and a voice called, Hunter, are you in? Without taking my eyes off the bird, I replied that I was. Telephone call, the voice said. Libby and I glanced at each other, then back to the bird. A foot twitched. Libby hid her face again and shrank against the wall. I called that I was coming, then rushed to grab a shoebox from the top of the wardrobe, discarded the lid, and turned the patent leather heels I saved for special occasions out onto my bed. I grabbed a pen and stabbed a few rough holes into the base, then upended the box and placed it over the bird. Leave it under there until I get back. It'll feel safer in the dark. The messenger, a girl from my hockey team, was waiting at the top of the stairs. At my appearance, she called back in a sing-song voice, It's a boy. This news was met with a chorus of oohs and ahs from within the rows of rooms that flanked the corridor. Thomas. My face flushed pink. First with the unwanted attention, then because I was blushing at all, and finally with irritation that I hoped it might be him. Thomas would never think of me as anything but the scruffy girl from next door. It was stupid to imagine anything different. The telephone hung inside a wooden booth in an alcove beneath the grand staircase. I looked for Lily and a group of her friends who had gathered in the common room. They were dressed in their Sunday best, either waiting to be picked up for lunch or having recently returned from church. Each girl was wearing a dress in a different pastel color, and clustered together as they were, they reminded me of a bowl of ice cream, a scoop of strawberry, a scoop of mint, a scoop of lemon. The only man I ever spoke to on the phone was my father, who called every Sunday. He'd ask a couple of questions about classes, field hockey, and then sign off with an awkward business-like phrase, keep well, or let's keep in touch, as if we ever wouldn't. Hello? Johnny? It was Thomas. At the sound of his voice, a rush of heat traveled through me. It sparked down my arms and fizzed in my fingertips. I became aware of the weight of the receiver in my hand. I pressed a flat palm over my sternum, certain that the thud, thud, thud of my heart would be picked up by the receiver, conveyed through the wires via the central telephone exchange, and into the entrance hall at the Turner's farmhouse, where the phone sat on a small mahogany bench and where Thomas would be standing. To punish my old friend for having this effect on me, I did not reply. Hello, he repeated. I kept my voice even. Who is this? It's me, Thomas. Yes, I lengthened and softened the vowel to effect a more urban sophistication, then rolled my eyes at myself. Is Lily with you, Eve? Irritated that he was looking for my sister, I decided not to tell him that she was at church. Why? You need to find her. The antelope inside me lifted its head with an instinct for danger and froze. When I spoke again, it was in my own voice. Why? What's the matter? Hold on a minute. Thomas's voice muted as he covered the mouthpiece with his hand and spoke to someone else in the room. Tunny, Eve's on. He spoke in fits and starts as if he was listening and talking at the same time. Thomas, he didn't reply. Is something wrong? Hang on, Eve, I'm waiting for your ma. He paused, and in the background, I heard a woman's voice. He continued, It's about your dad. I'm sorry. Thomas's voice was followed by the sound of the telephone being passed, as if someone was threading the instrument through one end of a woolen sleeve and pulling it out the other side. The slam of a door, distant voices, a woman's high, keening cry. Heels advanced across the floor. I felt a wave of something elemental rush towards me, an impulse to run. I held the handset away from my ear and covered the black bloom of the earpiece with my hand. The wave pooled inside my bare feet and crept up my ankles, filled my thighs, circled my hips, and leached into my stomach. When I lifted the phone back to my ear, my mother's voice was explaining about a fault with the electric drill up at the barn, that they had tried to revive him, but it was too late, that the shock was too severe and sustained, a short in the wiring. I pictured the stunned bird's clawed foot, my father's clawed hand, electricity buzzing blue beneath his skin. The girl in lemon was leaving. She grew small as she walked towards the front door where a young man in a dark suit waited. Her kitten heels clipped across the wooden floor, were quiet on the carpet, and clipped again on the other side. As she reached the man, he opened the door, and a sudden burst of light burned them both into silhouettes, smoking their edges. They went through together, and the door swung closed, leaving the lobby darker than it had been before. Eve, my mother's voice was thick and unfamiliar. I felt a disconnection from my own name. Eve, a numbness like when I fell asleep on my arm, settled through my body, which felt heavy and unresponsive. I sat down hard on the small bench built into the side of the phone booth. Why are you telling me this? What do you mean? Over the phone. My mother inhaled and exhaled inside the earpiece. Evie, you must find Lily. Thomas is leaving now to pick you up. Is he all right? Something in my voice must have drawn the attention of the strawberry and mint girls at reception. They turned in my direction. I spun my back to them. Where is he? I said. He just left. He'll be in Johannesburg in about an hour. Not Thomas. Where's Dad? There was silence, broken by my mother drawing a breath. When she spoke again, it was through tears. Evie, you need to pack a bag. The strawberry girl pushed the phone booth's concertina door open. Sounds from the boarding house, calling voices, music, quick footsteps across the floor, came to me as if through a shell held to my ear with the hiss of wind across sea. The girl looked concerned and offered me her hand. Uncertain about what she intended, I placed the telephone handset into her open palm and shoulder first nudged past her out of the wooden booth. My dad died. I had never considered what life might look like after my father's death. I knew, of course, in the same way I knew that birds flew, that he would die one day as everybody did. It was my mother's death, I'd often imagined, accompanied by the uncomfortable thrill of excitement at the temporary celebrity that my mother's loss would bring. As long as I could remember, there had been periods where my mother was absent, drifting in and out of our lives like a season. The time she was present, when she laughed or joined in with our games or met us in the morning, already dressed, hair neat, preparing breakfast, was like essential sunshine, and I harvested what I could quickly and regularly, constantly alert to the possibility that the axis might tilt and she would fade away again. But my father was different, solid, present, and reliable. My future lay before me as a straight road highlighted by important events that lit up like street lamps, and my father appeared in all of those events, standing on the steps of the school at my matriculation, helping me move into my first flat, teaching my children how to swim in the river, how to drive, holding their small bodies securely on his lap behind the wide, thin steering wheel of the old blue truck. In all these projections, my father existed forever on the farm where my future family would visit every Sunday for lunch. I waded across the lobby. At the staircase, I gripped the banister with both hands and lifted each foot higher than was necessary, as if I was stepping over an invisible barrier. Wood was hard. Stairs went up. Light cast shadows. My pale feet stepped heel to toe, heel to toe, heel to toe along the wooden floor. I opened the door to the dorm room. From Libby's reaction, her wide eyes and O-shaped mouth, and the sudden way she was on her feet, I understood that my new reality was etched on my face. My dad died, not is dead, as if it was an impermanent state, a passing event that could still be rectified. I paused for a moment in the truth of the statement. My dad died, and felt into myself for the appropriate emotion. There was shock, there was disbelief, but mostly there was a hollowness not unlike hunger, an empty yet steadying practicality asking, what now? Stiff upper lip, Johnny, the words arrived in my father's voice. I crossed the room and dropped into the chair in front of the desk where I had begun a very different Sunday morning only a short while ago. Through my dampened senses, the rugby players thudded against one another on the field outside. A car engine fired into life was revved, then faded. The opening notes of Perry Como's Some Enchanted Evening floated in from the corridor. As I stared, the light coming through the picture window split into tiny molecules of color that distorted the room. How's your mother? Libby asked, and I was embarrassed to realize that I hadn't thought to ask. I shook my head. What happened? An electric shock. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Eve. Libby knelt before me and took both my hands in her own, her eyes filling with tears. I could tell that she was holding herself back from asking too many questions, and I was grateful for the consideration. Not because I didn't have any answers, but because I didn't want to dwell on the questions of how somebody dies of an electric shock. Does it hurt? Is it quick? I recalled a black and white photograph I'd once seen in a magazine of a wooden chair attached to the ground by metal hinges, leather straps hanging from the armrests and from the front legs, a domed metal cap positioned above it. I didn't want to imagine my father's clenched teeth, his frantic limbs, his hands clawed and reaching. The wave swept through my chest and choked me. Stiff upper lip, don't let the side down. Family business is family business. I withdrew my hands from Libby's. Thomas is on his way. I need to find Lily and I need to pack a bag. Let me do it, Libby said, and immediately busied herself with the task. She asked a girl in the corridor to find Lillian Hunter, then pulled an overnight bag smarter than anything I owned off the top of her own wardrobe and filled it with items from my shelves: underwear, stockings, a nightdress, 2 school blouses and a pinafore, a navy skirt. Like a sick child whose mother does all the caring, I allowed her to make all the decisions, even about which toiletries I might need: a toothbrush, toothpaste, a tub of face cream, as well as to respond to the concerned line of faces that appeared one after another at our door until Libby closed it. Bad news travels fast, she said, sifting through my school uniforms and the few dresses hanging in my wardrobe. The upturned shoebox on the desk shifted with a light nudge from within. Securing the box with one hand, I slipped my other hand under the textbook and carried both to the windowsill in front of the open window. Slowly, carefully, I lifted the side of the box that faced the window while keeping the side closest to me closed against the book, like my father had taught me to lift rocks in the felt in case a snake rested underneath. There was a quiet hop, then a scratch, like a sharp pencil moving across paper. The bird came into the light, blinked its hot red eye, then pushed and flapped in one movement, and it was free. A print had been left on the glass by the weaver bird's impact. Ghostly flight feathers, tipped splayed wings, individual tufts of down on the soft crop, the small head, and even the tiny nostril were etched on the glass in oil, like a memory. The end.
Sam, that was so incredibly evocative and powerful. I'm like, oh my gosh, you got me.
Thank you very much.
I had a bad feeling about that bird flying in there. Bad feeling. That was intense.
Thank you.
We're going to have a lot of great questions at the end.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
That was so incredibly beautiful and powerful and heartbreaking and so totally vivid. And, later you'll have to go on, Facebook and YouTube and just see all of the comments and all of the love from during your reading. Just absolutely powerful.
Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And we'll see you in the Q&A.
Yes.
Great. All right, Chris, let's bring up Chris. Christopher Madden.
How are you?
I'm just fine.
Looking good.
There's a reason Sam Keller's book was the honorable mention, the runner-up.
Oh, yeah.
Sharon McCallum, the guest judge, said if she could have awarded 2 prizes, she would have awarded one to Sam as well.
Oh,
it's beautiful work.
Great stuff.
Absolutely. It's such a treat to have you here, Chris, our friend, our fellow alum, and a Woodhull Press rep. It's so fabulous to have you. Also a Fairfield professor yourself. And we'll read your bio in a moment, but welcome. Yeah, and you're coming from your main house with your skylight going on. I see like a beam of sun coming down back there. So nice.
That was a skylight, but it fell off in the snow. But now it's a dormer.
Okay.
I hope no birds came in when that fell off.
No birds.
It's always a bad sign. Okay.
No one's around. It's the skylight falls alone in the forest, and our nosy neighbor was here to hear it. So.
Oh no. All right,
dear.
Chris, would you like to read Chris's bio?
It'd be an honor.
Fabulous.
An honor. Christopher Madden was. I don't know how much of this is true. Was born in a laundromat under a full moon on a Friday the 13th during the summer of love. I believe it. Yeah, even if it's not true. He has a BA in English from the University of Wisconsin, an MFA in fiction from where else? Fairfield University, and a BA in sideshow skills from Coney Island, USA. When he is not eating fire or hammering spikes into his head, which we've all seen, he is an adjunct instructor of writing at Fairfield University and a founder and partner at the great Woodhull Press. Chris does stuff. He co-directs the Black Rock Art Guild Performing Artists. He publishes and edits stuff, including Tom Siegel's award-winning book, The Astronaut's Son, which has been read here on our little program.
Yes.
As well as Fairfield Book Prize winner Brooke Adams' Law's Catch Light and Songs from a Voice by the great Baron Wormser and more. His work has appeared in Silver Birch Press, Timano, Spry, Ball, and Airways Magazine, and he is the author/editor as Penny Farthing of Alice's Adventures in #Wonderland, a gentle update of the Lewis Carroll classic for the digital age. For more information, you can look up blackrockartguild.wordpress.com, also woodhallpress.com. Welcome, Chris Madden.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. I was here early on in the pandemic, early last summer, when the world was looking a little bit more glum. I'm pinch hitting for Ryan Stovall. Ryan couldn't be here tonight. His poetry manuscript, like Black Snowflake Smothering a Torch, which is largely about his time in Afghanistan, was one of the finalists. So I'm going to read one of my pieces, but I wanted Ryan's voice to be represented, so I reached out to him and he picked a few poems and was glad that I could share them. Again, you'll sort of see the Afghanistan theme. The first one's called San Shield. All mothers always stand stiff and proud for all the world to see, but all mothers have always longed to whisper to all sons, San Shield is fine, just return to me. This next one's called Zen. If a coffee cup, an oversized metal travel mug, is dropped, bounces between several pairs of sturdy boots, slides out the open door of an American helicopter hovering above the dusty streets of Keller, droplets spewing a chrome meteor that spins, shining down through the sunlight, filling cool desert morning air, gathering 1,000 feet of speed, before striking a child on a bicycle and splitting her head like a dark-haired pumpkin hit by an axe. Does it make a sound in America? Winning. I don't want to win the old way anymore. We used to kick doors down or blow them in, no huffing or puffing though, and certainly not by the hair on anyone's chin. Then we all come running in and shoot anybody stupid enough to still be holding a gun, a knife, a baby, or any other weapon. Brutal, yes. And mistakes were sometimes made, but clean, simple, and direct. And most definitely an end. He won't have the guts to try that again, we'd say, looking at a corpse blown open, eviscerated thin, blue sausage link intestines spilling out secret and embarrassing to us, like we were paramedics cutting off soiled undies. He just Houdini'd on us, we'd joke, straight up and disappeared. Where'd he go? Well, someone would say, pointing, some of them's over there, but where's the rest? I've got 3 fingers and a chunk of skull with scalp and hair. Someone will call out from a dusty corner, an excited prospector spying something beautiful and rare. And look, he even made it up to the ceiling. He's coming back down now, though drip, 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 drip. I guess he's your grandma's glasses. We'd say, he's everywhere and nowhere all at once. Last mistake he'll ever make, we'd quip, looking down at sockets missing eyes and thighs blown open like exploded footballs, muscles raw, exposed, and bloody as a steak. Strips of cloth and shards of door, splintered slimy bone, and just plain grit, all ground into his leg meat to form filthy hamburger. We'd sing, when we come a-knockin', your house will be rockin'. When we come a-knockin', your house will be rockin'. Don't answer the door, 'cause we're gonna come right in. Don't answer the door, dude, someone would advise, squatting down beside our friend with his empty fleshy sockets and disintegrated thighs. Yes, very honest, very simple, clean, direct, and oh so final. And we called that winning. But I don't sleep much these days, not with all these memories of winning. Up and running races through my head at 2 a.m., my lowest ebb. So I don't want to win that way anymore. No. If it will help me rest, then I want to win the new way. This final one's a short one. It's called Manhattan. We feel guilty when we return to too many staring faces, shuffling these sundown-drenched streets, brown, black, or pale. Some are sweating. All seem accusatory until we see we're okay. Because while a few are out enjoying themselves on the Hudson's water, not a one of them is walking on it. All right, so those are poems from Ryan Stovall's collection. I'm going to switch over to my material, which is a little bit less intense. This short story is called The Penobscot Book Club. It's set in Maine. I figured it was perfect for joining you from Maine. So it's about Maine, and there's nothing you really need to know about it. Tessa's lunch was little more than a mirage, a survivor from the Chrome era that served pie and fiddleheads, an authentic Down East grub in a Maine town way above the Volvo belt. Tess was proud to be tougher than a boiled owl, and her food was good in a place where there were so few options it was enough to just be open. It wasn't actually named Tessa's, but nobody called it by its given name. My name is Kimball, as if that matters, and I'm from away. The term from away refers to non-Mainers, to you, sometimes to people from other parts of Maine. There's a fierceness about those born in Maine, an idea of legitimacy and pedigree that isn't written down, as if Maine babies were born wearing blue tarp diapers and holding a lobster claw rattle. My mother calls me from away as if I had the choice to be born in Boston. I'm still from away, even though I spent summers in Maine and have relatives buried from Kittery up to the county. One part of the family we don't talk about lived much of their lives on a Maine island going back to 1886. Even with roots deep as a mine shaft, I will always be from away. I was eating at Tessa's lunch counter once next to a guy in a Portland Sea Dogs hat that had the temerity to ask Tess for clarification on the issue. What's the statute of limitations for that being an outsider, he asked. He appeared to be very sincere. I mean, I've been here 18 years and my kids were born here. My son's a native, right? That should qualify. We named him Baxter after Baxter Park. What I'm saying is, how long does that whole from away business last? Not near long enough, Tess replied, and filled his coffee and walked away. You'll have to excuse me, but the roots do matter some, although I am of the school that doesn't believe they should be pulled up and used to flog strangers. The Penobscot Book Club was a weekly oasis for outsiders and human jetsam that had ended up in town. Perhaps mirage is a better term than oasis. Two Somali sisters worked at Tessa's, Janella and Lupita, and they mostly ran the place, and Tessa's husband Clem had fallen off the perch and been buried wearing his NRA hat and jacket. Tess still put in an appearance at the holidays and around the time of the county fair, but Nell and Loopy had been running the place almost exclusively. They had started as cleaners and dishwashers and moved up to cooking because they tended to show up for work even during hunting season, or if the fish were running, or the Sox were in the playoffs. Tess and Clem were equal opportunity misanthropes. They didn't like anybody, but the women spoke the one language they respected, hard work. The book club's deal with the women was simple. Nell and Loopy opened the restaurant Tuesdays from 6 to 9, and for $10 each, they would feed us whatever they were cooking. It was the day the diner was usually closed. We could bring our own booze and could even smoke, although no one other than Nell usually did. If you were flush, you'd throw in $20 to cover the times when you might only have 5 or 8. The food was an adventure: elk with peas, pepper goat stew, turkey chili, or alewives fish chowder, and almost always pie. They would get ahead on prep for the week, but I think that most of their time was spent tweaking pie recipes to win a coveted blue ribbon. As long as you didn't send the food back or swear too much and you left by 9, you were welcome. Nell was less gregarious than Loopy and did the cooking. Loopy was friendly and in the place, but not famous for being friendly. Both were liked well enough. I spoke to them both more than most people in town. And I'm having technical difficulties, so I've just lost the connection for my story. I'm going to boot up my other computer. So sorry, it's the joy of the main connection. This is going to take me just a moment. Chris and Katie, do you want to interrupt?
No worries, Chris. Loving this story. I just was typing how much I love this main diner scene and these characters. And you were in the perfect location for that in this fabulous main home that you're in. I'm feeling the vibes. And it's calling me, it's making me recall Travis. Do you remember when Travis did his reading and he read some plays and it was very Maine, it was they were very Maine plays.
Did Travis read from Dog's Pond?
Oh, I don't remember the title.
That's one of them. He has one blue tarp which
Yes.
won the main prize, and he has a play that's called Dog's Pond that's actually vaguely clear. So this will take me just a minute. I'm sorry.
No, please don't worry. I'm feeling like we should have a main night. Get Baron up here, you, Travis. And maybe we can get Ryan's poems, which is absolutely just so powerful and intense and vivid and heartbreaking. So incredible. You can see why of course he was a finalist. Just incredibly powerful stuff. So just as a shout out to say how amazing that was.
Yeah, they're wild, and they're so intense. And those were so intense. He picked those to read.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing those with us, and for allowing us to hear them. I hope that his manuscript will be published very soon.
Yes, he's adding some poems to it, and during this break, I always think of the Jackie Gleason show, which was live, where he came out in front of the curtain and said, "Does anybody have a light?" and lit a cigarette and adjusted his sunlight and was smoking and said, I always wondered what would happen with live television. We figured someday we'd have a prop or a scene and something would go wrong or we'd come out of commercial and wouldn't be ready. So we'd always have discussions preparing of what would happen if this went wrong. And he said, and this is what would happen.
Well, there you go. And, you can just take whatever minutes you lost. Don't deprive us of any of that great story there.
Okay. I'm almost back into it.
Perfect.
So what I found out, and we have, we're in the middle of the woods at what my stepfather used to call it, east of East Jesus. What I discovered is the feedback loop I was getting was from the power and the Wi-Fi, because our Wi-Fi runs across a lake. Okay, so I'm going to pick up. And I'll be looking away. Nobody's tuned in to watch me anyway, just to listen. So
no. You look great, Chris. And
thanks so much. I feel fantastic too.
Good. So, all right. See you.
When we last left off, Loopy and Nell are Kimball's neighbors, and they live above the hardware store in town, which is an old building. And it's closed. It's been long closed down because of the Home Depot nearby, a very main story. But they become friends, and this is why they allow this group to sort of use the diner where they're prepping the food. The diner itself featured crooked floors, a long lunch counter, 8 wooden booths. Oh, that's too much. The diner itself featured crooked floors, a long lunch counter, 8 wooden booths, and about 10 tables. The original building had been supplanted by an attached single wide that served as the kitchen. Pine boards lined the walls and the Formica tabletops, and they were clean, if somewhat warm. The only thing out of place was a round navigating dome in the ceiling of the men's room that had been repurposed from a Korean B-1 bomber. Book club started in late September when things slowed down. Most of us behaved like Mainers and had 5 jobs, even if we were from away. I painted houses and delivered firewood and turned wrenches at Yuri's tire if they were shorthanded. Boxcar worked for the highway department and Jess spent her summers waiting tables and landscaping down on Old Orchard Beach. A retired pilot sometimes sat in and we had to remind him that there weren't wings on the building when he invariably took over the discussions. Sometimes we talked books or worked on original writings. We read Salinger, Sarah Owen Jewett, some Hawthorne. One guy had a 20-cent copy of The House of Seven Gables that kept falling apart as he read it. Most Maine towns have a table full of old men and prognosticators at the hardware store or Laverdier's Drug. Tuesday at Tessa's was our version of that sacred social entity that Maynard Stephen King calls the bullshit table. And everyone actually read or tried to read the books. It was venison chili night when the bus crowd arrived on the first Tuesday of December. We were reading Boxcar's poetry and the intrusion was quite welcome. Boxcar self-identified as a foamer, a rabid train fan that foamed at the mouth when a train passed or someone mentioned anything to do with trains. Box wrote long train poems with stanzas linked like freight cars and had blatant turns at the end that he insisted on calling the caboose of the poem. The chili was good, fortunately. It was close to 9 and we were going to pack up and head out before the witching hour. Griffin, Rudy, Tim, and Jess had already gone home. Box and I were the only book club members left. And then the door opened. 13 cold denizens from the bus that had broken down up the street were in the door before Loopy got a chance to say that they were closed. They had a flat tire and they were unable to change it in the snowstorm, and they wanted to use the phone. Tessa's did have a phone, an old wooden booth, but no service. Tess had hung a sign on it that said that because of cell phones, the payphone was now just nostalgic. Don't you have cell phones, Box asked them. The group shook their heads. They were certainly a group of some sort, dressed in black, college, and 20-somethings by the look of them, maybe 30s. Who knew? The women had long capes and long black dresses. They were performers or reenactors of some kind. They certainly were committed to the look. They could be trying witches or performing at a Renaissance fair, but there wasn't anything like that around this time of year. Is there anyone you can call? The man that appeared to be the leader asked. He was older, maybe in his late 30s, early 40s. I don't know anyone around here, and we're in a real pickle money-wise. We can make it square when the bank opens again tomorrow. You can try AAA, I said, but you'll get a machine. I'm not a big voicemail fan. If you want to talk to something that doesn't answer, you can talk to God, I suggested. You shouldn't joke about things like that, he said. You don't know what you're talking about. I let it go. This was part of Maine where people still said Jesus, so as not to take the Lord's name in vain. It was not my intention to offend them. Look, AAA probably won't come out here in bad weather. Yuri's is closed, but I can call Tate at home. He'll probably help. Tate was not happy about getting out of bed, but he agreed to take the wrecker out. 9 p.m. around here was the equivalent of 3 a.m. everywhere else. Hey, he wants to know if the spare's good. The leader, who was also the driver, nodded. And the back cargo door on the right, it's open. The jack's missing. The key's in it. Tate asked me who was paying. No idea. I'm good for it if I have to be, I said, and I hung up. Might take a while. You folks should have a seat. Bless you all, the leader said. Can we just get glasses of water? One of the women asked. We're kind of flat pocket. If we weren't sure that our hosts were listening, Nell threw something in the kitchen that made a loud smash. They were listening. Loopy looked at her watch and shrugged. Boxcar pointed to his pocket to indicate that he'd help pay. I also nodded. Please sit. Be our guest, Loopy said. I'm thankful you stopped in. We have too much food tonight, and I hate for any of it to go to waste. You must be hungry. I followed Loopy back into the kitchen. Look, ladies, I'll stay and make sure they get set if you want. I'll serve and clean up or whatever. You don't have to do this. What else are they going to do on a night like this? Nobody else to help them, Nell said. We will stay, and you, Kimball, will wash the dishes. Sure thing. Thank you. Really, we're not doing this for you, Loopy added. I washed my hands and helped bring up the bowls of chili and setups. Nell brought glasses of water and a pitcher of iced tea. The group seemed thankful but guarded. They joined hands and said grace before they dug into the chili. It was only 6 or 8 degrees outside, and they were still cold and huddled in their capes. One thing not included in book club nights was a lot of heat. Tess insisted that the heat stay low. The book group people usually bundled up because the temperature in the diner was rarely out of the low 50s in winter. Several members of the bus group warmed their hands over the chili. I walked over and addressed the group. I said, well, if you're cold, you can stand in the corner because it's 90 degrees. But that doesn't really work there, because it's not really straight. None of them really laughed, but some of them smiled. One woman who was still wearing mittens gave me a big, warm smile. I smiled back and I returned to the table with Box. I looked up at her. She had an angular face and large eyes, and the lack of makeup only accentuated her wholesome beauty. She was quite striking. They ate and conversed quietly, almost as if they were embarrassed to be there. Box tried to chat them up. Say, where did you all say you were from? No one answered. So we went back to discussing train sidings and the best cabooses to put on your property for outbuildings. And after a few minutes, the group started singing. The singing was low at first, but their voices got louder and filled the room. Almost like a boat that was far off at first, but then pulled up right next to the sirens. Their voices were beautiful, rehearsed, and practiced. The bus driver had a deep baritone, thick as an old tree trunk. They sang of whalers and ships sinking and true love and scrimshaw. We were stunned. I can't even tell for certain how long we were listening. Something about it felt like being washed away in a warm ocean wave. And then we were all dancing. The mitten woman took my hand in her large hand and spun me. Another in a robe twirled boxcar, and 2 of the men even controlled Loopy and Nell onto the dance floor. They kept singing about lonely sirens and widows walking the docks in the fog. I've heard of synesthesia, where people have smell confused with hearing. I don't have it, but when I try to remember the tunes or words of the songs, I can only really see images. Gunnels and potwop and lobster pots and nor'easters. Even trying to describe it, I feel like I'm trying to hold my hands up to the light and depict waves crashing in the shadows on the wall. That doesn't make any sense, but the memory of it is quite beautiful. At one point, the women in the mittens waved to me and we were dancing a slow waltz. Even with my 2 left feet, it was perfect. We'd stop and clap along with the tunes. And then Tate finally walked in during a ditty about a harpooner falling in love with a mermaid. The group noticed Tate in his coveralls and assumed he was the mechanic, and the singing and dancing stopped. Tires changed, Tate said. I'm sorry it took so long, but a bunch of the lug nuts were frozen and I had to heat them up. Blessings to you, sir, the leader said, and the group applauded him. I looked at Tate and made a little check signal and pointed at myself. Tate seemed to understand, and he was pretty animated. He said, that bus is gorgeous. Where'd you get such a bar find? Was it a Bluebird? It looks like it's from the 40s. Pretty much, the group leader said. It has a Studebaker body. It came to us by the grace of the man above. He shook Tate's hand like he was going to pull it off. Look, we really must go. Okay, stop somewhere soon and get them to double check the spare. It's on there now. It looks good. I also put a plug in the tire itself, and it's in the back. But you want to make sure it's going to hold before you put it back on. And you might have someone retorque the lug nuts after 30 or 50 miles or so. May we say thanks? The group took our hands and we made a circle. Tate, too. We made a big oval in the tiny room, and they recited what they called a sea prayer for people adrift. Like the songs, I can only feel the sense of the thing, but it was wonderful. The mitten woman kissed me on the cheek. They bowed and they left, and they were gone. What in the hell were those songs, Box asked. The only sea shanty I know is called Friggin' in the Rigging, but I thought it might have been impolite to call that one out to the churchies. Maybe you can teach it to us for next week, I said. They sang for their supper, didn't they? Sorry it took so long, Tate said. I'll cut you guys some slack on the hourly, but the thing was a bear. Nice people. Hourly my ass. It took you what, like 20 minutes, I said? He said, no, it's 11:45. Took over 2 hours. The bus had been in the snowbank just up the road. We stepped outside to see it, but it never passed the diner. Tate went on and on about the original paint and the fact the bus even had vintage plates. All of this seemed very incidental and oddity. It was past midnight by the time we finished cleanup and left the diner, the equivalent of an all-nighter in a town that rolled up the sidewalks at 9. We had stopped arguing about time and everybody was quiet, but somehow calm. The snow was bad enough now that my Ranger got stuck in it, so Loopy, Nell, and I piled into Boxcar Silverado, and the heat was just starting to come up when we heard the explosion. That's back in town, Box said. Thanks to the snow, we arrived on Main Street just after the fire department. The roads were passable but slow. They were soaking down the buildings next to what was left of Luce's hardware in our apartments. The water was already freezing into icicles in the small arcs. The Luce's hardware building had, as the volunteer fire chief suggested, gone up like a magician's flash paper. It was still raging, but there wasn't much of it left. I thought you all were inside, Captain Briggs said. I'm so pleased to see you. We should be dead, Nell said. We watched the blaze in the falling snow, warming our hands like snowmen without getting too close. The fire resembled more of a massive burn pile of a building, and it wouldn't go out. Loopy was crying, more of a howl, really. Everything we had was in there. It's just stuff, I said. We'll be okay. We'd never even shaken hands, but I hugged her and just said, just stuff over and over. Maybe I was saying it for myself. On a normal night, all three of us would have been sound asleep. Stuff, Loopy said, just stuff. Why aren't we dead? It's just stuff. A couple of things got cleared up by the following summer. Luce's hardware was an old wooden structure dating back to the 1870s, basically a tinder box, but the explosion was traced to improperly stored propane tanks in the building. Some genius at Luce's had gotten a deal on Duraflame logs, not a popular seller in an area where even grandmothers split a cord of wood in a day. This extended the blaze and incinerated almost every trace of the building. The fire department estimated that there were about 10 dozen cases of the logs in the basement and that the building went under in less than 2 minutes. In early July, Nell, Loopy, and Tess won a blue ribbon for moose jerky and the strawberry rhubarb pie. Tess's pie was always good, but the sisters did something to the recipe that they wouldn't tell anyone. Tess stood for the ribbon and her face betrayed a mixture of pride and envy. I suspect that she knew about the change to the pie, but not what the ingredients were. And in August, my last remaining relative out on the island died. One overcast morning, my mother and I rode the ferry and watched the seagulls drift in the wind. Uncle Hollis's house was going to a cousin, but there were a few items left in it that were up for grabs. The building itself had been struck by lightning and had some damage. The roof was a patchwork of blue tarps and green tarps, and they were all faded and in bad shape. Some things had been left to Mom in the will, but the pickings might have been better if we had gotten out sooner. We were looking through the things, and a woman stopped by to offer condolences about Hollis, and she said she recognized Mom. You have the look of a Deshane, she said. Hollis was a gentle soul. So you didn't really know him then, she said. No, I did. I suppose gentle's a relative term. Since you're so perceptive, my mother said, any idea who filched my grandmother's quilt trunk? About this high. She made a motion with her hand, brown, pre-war. You have it, maybe? Good day, the woman said. Sorry for your loss. She was slightly indignant, but she hurried away. My mom continued rooting through the stuff, but now she was muttering to herself. You okay, I said. I hate this island. My family goes back 5 generations here, and they treat us like invaders. A busybody woman knows damn well that Hollis was a horse's ass. She's probably going to put her feet up on my grandmother's quilt trunk when she gets home and rub her dirty boots on it. Someone had cleared the house, and there was a burn pile. There wasn't much left, but we found a wet cardboard box, and it contained some photos of our dour ancestors. One framed picture was a group in black suits and long black gowns. The group had their hands up as if they were hitting a finale or singing for a note, except for one woman who had her hands behind her back. She had an angular face and large eyes. and was clearly more beautiful without makeup. No fucking way, I said. What? Mother, who are these people? Well, let me see, she said. She looked at the picture for a while and took off her glasses and held the picture up to her face. Oh, they're islanders. Look here. She pointed to the edge of the photo. That one is your great Aunt Jean. She died a long time before you were born, when I was still pretty young, but I met her when I was a teenager. You have got to be shitting me. Language, Kimball. Geez, stop it. I am not kidding you. Pop brought me to see her sing with her church singing group in Rockland. They were the Seashells or some such. That's the group. Jean had a voice like a cherub. They mostly did old whaling songs. The Maritime Museum would have killed to have a recording of them. I looked at the picture again and pointed to the woman on the end. And you're certain that's Great Aunt Jeannie? Like, absolutely. That's her. She has those big eyes like headlights. Hollis had them too. Hollis was her nephew, I think. It gets confusing. He was the last one to stay on the island. He had the same look. He was always a little cool to me because I was from off, and that's what they called us from the mainland. Is there anyone that can verify this? Well, maybe. The church might have records, or the church from 1887 got wrecked in Hurricane Andrew. But we have a boat to catch, and we don't want to get us stuck out here. Mom looked at me and noticed the strange look on my face. She looked at the picture again. That's Jeannie, absolutely. I met her after the performance, just that once, but she used to haunt my teens. They all died in a fire in the mainland. Mom looked around her and lowered her voice. I know it's her because her hands are from behind her back. She had 6 fingers on each hand. Well, 5 fingers on each hand and 1 thumb. Anyway, it added up to 12. For a long time, I was terrified to have kids. I kept the photo and brought it back to the diner, and Nell begrudgingly agreed to hang it on the wall by the coffee maker. Lupita and I have been dating, and I help with Tessa's lunch when it's busy. We talk and talk, but she still shoos me out of the kitchen when she is cooking so I don't see her secrets. The Penobscot Book Club still meets on Tuesdays, and it's been a little quiet, and there hasn't been any singing lately. Tate comes by the book group, but it's half-hearted. He fell asleep once, and we just let him snore. I think he's hoping something strange will happen. I still don't know what kind of story this is, and I'm not going to profess to have any kind of objectivity. I hate it when people say this thing really happened or a book's based on a true story, especially if the book is lousy. When it gets quiet, I can still hear those sea songs, or at least I feel the gist of them, if not the words or melodies. They're pleasant echoes. From away or not, I should have been dead. Nell and Loopy, too. Either Maine or my great Aunt Jean or those dopey sea shanties saved our lives. But every time I tell this story, it sounds a little bit more like genuine Maine bullshit, the kind of yarn somebody spins at book club when nobody did the reading for that week. Thank you.
Chris, that was totally gorgeous.
Wow, it was a ghost story.
Ghost story, a miracle story, beautiful and powerful, and so like wonderfully heartwarming. And it's so funny what you said at the end there. Like, I hate when people say this stuff, but it's just perfect. But you did it perfectly. And
Thank you. With only one major technical interruption. So
Well,
hardly even remember that. What even happened?
Dramatically effective.
It was.
Well, thank you.
Indeed. Well, Chris B, it's time for our Q&A time.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yes. And we've got Sam Keller back up here. Let's give both of these fabulous people a round of applause. Sam Keller, finalist. Christopher Madden, sharing his own incredible work, as well as earlier some poems from the last finalist, Ryan Stovall.
Yeah.
Really intense, really powerful poems.
Amazing.
Yes. And so everybody, you need to start getting your questions up there. Send them in, type them in. Our friend Midnight just arrived. He's a little late, but he's here with us. He continues his streak.
Better late than never.
Absolutely. We have so many friends in the chat here. We have, I saw Meg Moore, Mark Berry, Victoria.
Mark Berry, my little brother.
Yes. Oh, so good to see everyone. And just you both have to go out and later and read the comments on Facebook and on YouTube. So while people are putting in their questions, I would love to hear a little bit, Sam, about your experience as a finalist, and maybe about what made you want to submit this manuscript and how that process felt like when you found out that you were a finalist for the Fairfield Book Prize.
Well, I had been working on this novel ever since I was at the MFA, so it's taken me many years.
Oh, yeah.
And I finally wrote, well, I've probably written about 15 final drafts, but in about September last year, I had one that I felt was probably as close to finished as I'd ever been.
Great.
And I shared it with a fellow, a girl I'd been at, I'm blanking on her name now.
It's okay. That happens.
Sorry,
it happens.
But I will remember. And once I had her feedback and everything, I decided then, Carrie McKay, sorry, Carrie, if you ever watch this. But I decided then that I was going to rewrite the whole book in first person.
Woo! In
about November, just before the deadline for the.
You would never know.
I wanted to enter, but, and I knew it was the December 15th, and I needed to get it done by then. And Ellen Gelman very kindly read it for me as I wrote, and I managed to get it done virtually the night of the submission deadline, and sent it in. So I was thrilled to be a finalist. It was fabulous. Yeah, but that's how I got to where I got.
Fabulous.
Sam, I have to ask, what made you make that change? I mean, we struggle with the point of view constantly, and then boom, it just came to you like this needs to be first person.
Yeah, and I don't even know, Chris, what my final decider was. I remember years ago when I was still at one of the residencies, I did a workshop with Da Chen. And he said to me, you should write this book in first person. And I said, no,
Oh.
I wanted to be in third person because I felt it gave me, the distance you need in third person, which enables you to look at things a bit more, from a big distance. And I think I just did an experiment. I wrote one of the chapters in first person, and I suppose, I don't know, that
was it the ghost?
Happens.
Speaking of ghosts, was it the ghost of Da Chen came to you?
Maybe. But yes, it just suddenly, I don't know, the voice just sounded clearer, I suppose. So
wow.
I did the rewrite, and I think
yes. Mark Berry just said Da synergy, absolutely. And you would, I mean, it was such excellent first person. You were so in her perspective and her emotions as she's finding this news, and even before that with the whole scene with the bird. What incredible work. Who would never have thought that you were just like, let's make this happen in a month. Oh my God.
No,
it totally worked.
There were about 5 years of work before that time.
Well, yeah. So you were really in it.
Sometimes that happens.
That's incredible. Christopher Madden, I should say, to clarify our Chris's. Yeah. Susan M. Davis is here. We got to say hi. But Christopher Madden, I'm dying to ask about from the Woodhall Press perspective. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Fairfield Book Prize and what your experience has been with it in general from the beginning, and also with this particular run of it?
Well, when we first talked to, New Rivers Press was changing, and unfortunately, I think they're shutting down. But we talked to Sonia and Bill about possibly taking over the book prize, and they said, "Are you interested?" And we said, "Of course." So we were jumping them down, and then we got a pile of submissions, and we had to narrow it down, and it was very strange. We're like, wait a minute, we don't get to pick the finalists. We get to turn it over. The first one, Phil Cly, was the first judge, and he picked Catchlight, which was wonderful. And Shara McCallum was this year's winner. And it's very interesting because it's strange. Somebody said, well, you guys are just going to pick your friends and your friends' books will win. And people were mad at me, well, why didn't I get in the finalists? I said, we actually, vetted this and did all of these things and read them. And there's a lot of very, very good work. And even, Sam's novel, which is beautiful, that she wrote in a month, except she was writing it for 5 years before.
Oh, no, I just meant the rewrite in the first person, which is still just totally incredible.
It's quite a feat. It's difficult. In fact, when I switched, I read the second half was a different version of that story. I had everything set and downloaded, and was trying to fix my Wi-Fi, so it's very hard to jump through and do it so well. But it's been interesting. Catchlight, Brooke won. Brooke had a 3-week-old infant, and she said, I won, I'm done, right? I don't have to do anything else. So she went through some drafts. It's been interesting, and there have been some wonderful books that haven't won or gotten honorable mentions. I think Shriver.
That's right.
Tommy Hahn's book, Open My Eyes, got a Kirkus starred review, great novel. So not winning, and a number of other books that have been published, including Catchlight. I think Brooke submitted that 3 times. And earlier when I was on, Sarah was on, I think Sarah might have submitted her wonderful novel, Gagine. And, part of it is picking, and we have different judges, so we put them forth, and both times we got close to 30 submissions. So this time one of our finalists had 2 people picked it. So it was quite an interesting process, sort of, but that's the sausage making, but we've enjoyed it. Victoria's book, A Body of Two Hemispheres, is fabulous. Yes. And even we recently did AJ O'Connell's book, A Perfect Facebook Life, her sort of memoir, and that was a finalist, and we ended up doing it. So it's actually difficult to. It would be really easy if we got mostly junk, but the writing's been very.
It's all incredible stuff, and we've heard from all of these manuscripts now, these finalist manuscripts, and we can't wait to get our hands on these books when they're published. And it's just a matter of time, basically. It's just a matter of time.
Absolutely, it's not again, and we're not. I mean, it's subjective too. We're not the be all and all. It's like Woodhall Press has cast you aside. You're not in the publishing. There are books that are all kinds of reasons, including it may be similar to something we've published, or it doesn't resonate, or we're just full. We've been doing. This is year 5. We started with 1 book in the first year. At the end of this year, we'll have 35 titles.
That is so awesome.
Some of it's timing and what we're available to work on and what we want to do. Yeah. And we've passed on things that have been extremely successful. So just, not getting in, it's hard to become a finalist at the book prize, and even harder to win it. So anybody that's, submitted, keep doing it. I know Victoria had said she was not going to enter. And again, Brooke entered several times. So the past couple of winners, Brooke was thinking of not entering again because it hadn't won before. So why would it win this time? So batters strike out, I think is what me Pappy used to say.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing all of that insight, Chris, about the prize and the process, and that's so cool because you're our friend and you're inside this publishing world and participating in it, and it's just great to hear that encouragement, because that's what we're so often told. Like, okay, well, just because one place may have passed on it for a lot of different kinds of reasons doesn't mean that manuscript isn't going to have tons of success out there, or just find its right match. It doesn't mean that it's not a fabulous manuscript. So it's great to hear that from you, and thank you.
My pleasure.
We have a question here from Anne McClellan Lardis. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Anne. Hey, Chris, can you read it?
Sure. She's asking Sam, I still think about the old people from your thesis reading. What is happening with that work?
What does she mean?
Explain what Anne's talking about.
And I think
if you can remember.
I did do a chapter from this novel, but I can't remember exactly which chapter I did. I think it might have been the first one. So I'm afraid I don't remember. Whatever happened to them? I've seen a book somewhere. I'm sure it's the same book.
Elaborate in the comments, Anne.
That book was a finalist. That's what happened with that work.
I know that Anne also attended a reading I did where I read a short story about a man with Alzheimer's, and I don't know whether she's thinking about them. Maybe. But that was a short story, and it did get published. It was the one that was in Kagibi, so.
Hey.
There you go. The man goes into the water. The woman has to save him.
That's
the one.
That's right.
Okay.
So yeah, she's conflating two different readings, but
yes. I'm not sure if Anne's thinking about that one, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds like
clearly two different memorable works from Sam. But Sam, I'd love to ask you what. We just know what you shared with us about this manuscript and this story, and what's gonna. We can maybe guess what's going to happen with this girl, but I would love to know a little bit more about the setting. In kind of this dorm in 1960 in South Africa, and what made you choose this time period? What made you choose that environment?
That's a good question. Rebecca's novel is in Lebanon, 1957. So it's interesting that we're getting this historical fiction thing going.
Time frame. Yeah. I mean,
fascinating.
I feel as if this book started off as one thing, Katie, and it's changed. It's changed its nature so many times. But I do remember when I first started writing it, or my first inspiration was the story of my mom's father, my grandfather, who was actually electrocuted building a fence around their farm. But what was really tragic about the fact that he passed that way was because he had been a soldier in the war, and he had been taken into Tobruk in Egypt by the Italian forces, was kept as a prisoner of war for about 3 years, I think, in Italy and in Germany, finally got out, got to Scotland, waited for 3 months for a ship, and made it all the way back to South Africa. And 9 months later died building a fence around.
Oh, Lord, how tragic.
Yeah, and my mother I think my grandmother was pregnant with my mother at the time. She wasn't even born yet. So I think, and my father's father also died similarly in the war, and both of my parents grew up without their parents. So for a long time, that was kind of my inspiration. Right, and when I started writing the story, I realized that I think when men die like that in war, or people, anybody, a mythology is kind of created around them. And there was lots of conversation from both of those branches of my family tree about the things that these men might have been. They were kind of blown into these, they were mythologized.
Yeah.
And I was impressed by that mythology. But when I started to think about them, I realized that I was more interested in the woman who had stayed, the woman who ended up raising the children, and the single moms, and the hard work they had to do. And and the very difficult things that they experienced. And Eve was my grandmother's name. So there's a lot of this book that is not influenced, but inspired by my family. But the story is its own. It sort of became its own thing, I suppose, as I wrote it. So it started off as one thing, and the South African setting was because of that, because that's where that initial action took place. You know. But I also felt that the apartheid background gave the dysfunction of the family and the kind of the sadness there another dimension, the sort of broken society, which has a lot of difficulties. So it all just kind of knitted together quite neatly.
Sure.
Fascinating and so incredibly powerful. And it's interesting to hear sort of that root of family history inspiration, even though of course the story is its own thing and goes in its own direction, and but that is so powerful and palpable too. And I think it's very, very interesting to have this in South Africa, you know. Certainly not a place we see as often in books as these very, very popular scenes and places that we end up reading about all the time, especially in the United States. And like you said, also that the issue of apartheid at the same time. Can't wait to get our hands on the book. My mom already said that in the comments a while back. So it's just a matter of time. Get that manuscript back out there.
My best. Thanks.
Gonna happen.
It is. It just is. It just is. And I have a question for Chris, but you go ahead, Chris B. I'm hogging questions.
Is this a story you heard? I mean, this has like the Chris Madden elements to it. I mean, it's Sasquatch is not in it, but it's
Isn't he or she? No, so none of that. So Kimball's actually a character in a novel that I'm working on that was inspired by my neighbor who works out his feelings by shooting a lot in the afternoon.
What a character.
I'm in a remote area. And my wife said, "Why does he keep shooting?" And I said, "Well, I think he must keep missing."
Oh dear.
A little range.
Is that how that skylight fell in or whatever it was?
No, I saw one of those for sale. Somebody had that on eBay, and I thought, why? No. Sorry. In the story, there's a skylight from a B-1 bomber.
I love that.
So Kimball's in another book, and sometimes I'll write characters doing other things. So in the book, he's 12 years old, and this is Kimball as an adult. So just to sort of figure out where the character's going. But the only thing in that has any basis in reality besides Maine, there really is this thing, you're not trusted if you're not from Maine. And my mom says, "Oh yeah, nice house here, you're from away." My mother and I were at a Thai restaurant having dinner in Damariscotta, where she used to live. And the table next to us, there were a group of 6 people, and they finished their dinner and started singing sea shanties at the top of their lungs in the restaurant. They weren't the entertainment. They didn't ask. They didn't introduce them.
Oh my God.
They were just sea shanty enthusiasts. And they just broke the song. And my mother and I were just looking at each other and just started cracking up. And so they just sort of showed up in this diner. And my mom did live on the island of Vinyl Haven for a long time. And Maine's very, very insular. So that was kind of the tie-in. And I just thought I have to do something with these frickin' sea shanty people.
Yeah.
you had to. And what a fabulous thing to do with them.
Yeah. So that just happened. And there is a phone booth at a diner, a mid-coast diner called Moody's, that has a sign that said, "This phone booth is nostalgic." And I always think, what's nostalgic for?
Right. No, that's
Right.
great. I was a little disappointed that Chuck Johnson wasn't in the story, but that's okay. Get him in there.
Can I ask a question, Chris?
Of course.
I'm interested, Chris, where the six-fingered lady came from. Is that someone you've met, or was it a detail that just arrived?
Yeah, no, that just arrived. Again, that's kind of that's not a dig at islands necessarily, but they are insular.
Very insular, yes.
You know, there's a reason there's no CSI North Haven. You know, DNA would match most of the island. Would narrow down the suspect list.
Oh my God.
Oh my
So
goodness.
you know, that was just sort of, you know, that was a quirk that showed up. That wasn't I wasn't meaning to pick on anybody who was
No, of
The
course
differently
not.
to, yeah, or close family.
Differently digitized. Oh my goodness. Well, Chris, we're getting close to 9:30.
Yes.
So should we ask our famous last question here?
I think we could.
Our last double question?
I think we should do that. That's our famous last question. I think Chris has probably answered this before, but it's okay. We always have room for more than one of these answers.
We always do.
That's right. So part one is what we call the pearls of wisdom portion of the question, which is just give us a pearl of wisdom for the writers out here watching this program. What's your pearl of wisdom for those folks? And part two is a book recommendation. Anything, doesn't have to be brand new. Could be something very old that comes to mind that you really think people should read. So pearl of wisdom and book recommendation. Take it away, Sam Keller.
All right. So my pearl of wisdom is something I'm trying to practice and not always successful at, but in my writing, and maybe it's for life as well, is to trust yourself. I think just to sort of listen to the times that you feel like writing and the times that you don't, and then go out and garden and don't feel you have to sort of sit at your desk punishing yourself all the time. You know, just trust yourself. And my book recommendation is, I have it here. It's called Disappearing Earth by Julia Phillips.
That's great.
And it's wonderful. I loved reading it. It's very interesting. It took her a very long time to write, and it's just so brilliant, beautifully written, and the stories are so interesting. And it's a strong recommendation for me.
Yeah.
Great.
Good one. Good one.
Thank you so much for your pearl and recommendation, Sam.
So my pearl of wisdom, I think I sort of answered it, but keep submitting.
Yeah.
There are so many good presses. There are so many things. I remember hearing about Shriver in maybe 2011 from Chris driving back from DC, and then it got placed and it's being made into a movie. And you know, if you work at your craft, there will be a right fit for it. And then also, it's actually on my stand, my book recommendation, Saigon.
Oh, yes, I've heard that.
It's a memoir by a Mainer named Phuc Tran, and Tran writes about moving to the United States as a legal immigrant fleeing Saigon at the age of 5, and being in rural Pennsylvania and not fitting in. He is a Latin teacher at a school in Portland, and he also owns a tattoo shop. So he threw himself into the American dream. He decided to learn about literature, and if he was going to be an outsider, that he'd be a punk, because the punks were outsiders by choice. So it's funny and it's fascinating. It's wonderful. So that's called Saigon.
So cool.
Yeah, that's such a great title.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you so much, Christopher Madden. Well, let's give a round of applause once again to finalist, Fairfield Book Prize finalist Sam Keller, and Woodhall Press's own Christopher Madden, as well as Ryan Stovall, who is here in spirit.
Yeah, great stuff.
Yes, thank you, Ryan.
Yes. Thank you so much for everything that you shared. Just incredible pieces. And we can't wait for them to be published really soon and to get into our hands so that we can hear them again. It's so great to see you all tonight. Thank you so much to our fabulous audience. Please, you got to go and read all of the comments and the love from so many of our friends here tonight, and your friends and family as well. And we will see you next week.
Next week with Julie Sarkisian and Phil Ginsberg.
Woo!
Another great night here at FUMFA Live. FUMFA Live.
Absolutely. I love it, Chris. All right. Thank you so much again, Sam and Chris, and have a good night.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.